Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 5 of our 6-part Eternal Masters full set review. So if you've been watching this series, you know we've been working our way through the color pie. Today we're going to look at all of the green cards as well as the Selesnya and Simic cards that are in the set. Now, having said that, if you've been watching, you know that this isn't a normal set release. These are all reprints, and these are some of those powerful cards in the history of Magic. So we kind of know what they already do, and we also know that they're all good. I mean, there's no cards here that are not playable and limited by any means. So what we're going to focus on here is more of a limited review of the set, and we're going to talk about where these cards fit as far as the archetypes that are available to you in Draft and Sealed. Now, the good news is this is an incredibly deep set, and each color, no matter what color you start in, you can go into any of the other 4 colors and have a viable draft deck that has a lot of cohesion to it. Now you can even go 3 colors and mix some of the mechanics together and have yourself some pretty powerful effects. Even 4 or 5 colors seems viable in this set. So we're going to talk about the archetypes that go along with green, and then we'll look at each card and see where they best fit. So if you start off in green and move into white, you'll have yourself a Selesnya Enchantment Matters deck. If you go into black, into Gullgary, you could have a very nice elf deck. If you move into Simic, you'll have a Threshold sort of self-mill deck that's all about efficiency. And if you move into red for Gruul, you can build a zoo deck with some bigger creatures and some ramp behind it. So having said that, let's get into the cards. And we're going to start off with Abundant Growth. Now, this is an interesting card. This is basically color fixing. So this is going for the deeper decks. If you're trying to go 3, 4, maybe even 5 colors, this is going to do well for you. What's interesting is, much like a lot of the recent standard releases, green is going to help you get into multicolors. This is a common card. It'd be easy to draft. However, you don't need to rely on green as much as some of the recent standard releases to go deep, because there are a cycle of dual lands at common in this set, so you're able to draft those and pick those up as well, and you might not be as dependent on cards like this. However, this is a great option for fixing. Not only does it make one of your lands give you any color, but it only costs 1 green, and you can trip off it as well, which is amazing value. Next we have Ancestral Mask, and this obviously wants to be in the enchantment deck where enchantments matter. I'm not super thrilled about playing a card like this though, because it's really easy to get 2 for 1, especially in this set. But if I'm in that deck, I might go for it, just because playing an enchantment itself will give me some value, and that makes a pretty big difference. So even if I'm 2 for 1, I may have been able to draw some cards or something off this, might make it worthwhile. And just the fact that if I'm getting, say, I don't know, +6/+6 on a creature or something, especially if it's like a trample creature or something with evasion, this could be quite good in that deck. Argothian Enchantress. Now this one's a mythic, so you're not going to see it very often, but if you're in the Selesnya deck, this is going to be just gravy on top. There's a very good common Enchantress that we're going to see in green. We already saw a uncommon one in white a few days ago. If you happen to pick up one of these on top of that strategy, that's awesome. This is a card that's very hard to deal with because it has Shroud. Keep in mind though, this also means that you can't target or enchant your creature either. Brawn. This really wants to be in the Threshold deck, because blue's milling itself. You're getting cards in your graveyard. You're trying to hit Threshold, and you have this card. Once it gets in the graveyard, also gives everything trample as long as you have a forest. And also in blue and uncommon, you'll find Wonder, which does basically the same sort of thing, except gives all your creatures flying. So if you can mill those 2 cards, maybe get Threshold, and all your creatures have trample and flying, yeah, that could be quite good. Centaur Chieftain. So here's one of those Threshold cards. Now this one has haste, and it's a 3/3 for 4, so there is a lot of value here. So even if you weren't in the Simic deck, I could see playing this just as a value creature. It's very good, but obviously this will shine in the Simic deck. Civic Wayfinder. So a couple of things with this card here. First off, if you're looking to get land out of your library, this could be a good option if you're going deep, 3, 4, 5 colors. However, even if you're not, it's an elf, so this is going to work really well in the Gullgary Elf deck, where just going wide with elves could be very good for you. So at some point, it might not even matter what the elf is doing exactly, you just want to get elves. This one's just fine, and it will help you make sure you don't miss any land drops as well. Commune with the Gods. So this is one that kind of wants to be in the Simic deck. It's going to dump cards in your graveyard, which is important for that deck. It does have other purposes, obviously. It could fit even into the Gullgary deck because it is an elf deck. However, there is some reanimation going on in black, so if you have some light reanimation strategy, could work well in some builds of that style deck too. Elephant Guide. Now here's an enchantment I like a lot. This has been reprinted not that long ago in Conspiracy, and even playing it in Conspiracy Limited, this is a very good card. What's nice is if the creature dies, now granted, it doesn't help you if it's exiled, but if it dies, you do get a 3/3 elephant, so at least you get some sort of value out of it part of the time. Having said that, it's an enchantment. It really wants to be in the Selesnya deck, but it's a strong enough enchantment. I could see playing this in the Zoo deck or even the Simic deck a lot of times, or even the Elf deck, anywhere you have targets for it. Elvish Vanguard wants to be in the Elf deck. If you don't have a fair amount of Elves in your deck, you probably want to skip this one, but if you have a lot of Elves, this can be quite good and get very big very quickly. Emperor Crocodile. So this wants to be in a deck where you're going wide, where you know you're going to have creatures. Out of all the archetypes in green, the Selesnya deck's may be the most awkward because you may have fewer creatures, more enchantments, and if you happen to draw this as one of your early creatures, it could be a little awkward. However, if you're going wide, like the Elf deck, for example, even the Simic deck, definitely the Zoo deck, you're going to have a lot of creatures. You might even be able to ramp into this, get it out a little bit early. This could be a pretty good beater in any of those archetypes. Flint Hoof Boar. Well, this obviously wants to be in the Gruul deck for Zoo. It's a great creature. It's going to work well if you have mountains. Getting a 3/3 for 2 is amazing. Plus, you can even give it haste for red. Still a good creature, though. Even if you're splashing red into another archetype, very economical. Fog. Fog's interesting. This was an interesting inclusion for me. Traditionally, not really a great card, Fog on its own. However, there is a strategy out there kind of called Turbo Fog that if you can draft a whole bunch of these and they're at common, Fog's better in multiples. So this is the type of card that if you get one or two of it, they're probably sitting in your sideboard. But if you really want to go into a Turbo Fog sort of strategy and you draft a bunch of these, and maybe you're playing this in your Zoo deck, for example, it allows you to just keep beating in and have Fogs on hand to prevent any of the kind of backlash. It can be a viable strategy. So it's a little bit niche. It's going to be for a very specific strategy, but for the most part, it's probably will sit in your sideboard most of the time. Gaia's Blessing. So this card's a little bit awkward with some of the builds because you don't really want to take cards out of your graveyard in a lot of cases. However, there's some use for this. So for example, the Simic deck, it's going to be milling a lot of things. If it happens to mill some cards you would like to get back, here's an opportunity to get them back into your library. You don't really want this thing to necessarily reset your graveyard. However, if you're in a situation where maybe your opponent turns the tables and starts milling you instead of themselves, if they have a similar mill strategy, then you might need this to stay alive. So in that case, it could be kind of a very niche sideboard card. I think where this is really going to be interesting, though, is if you're lucky enough to open Natural Order, which we're going to look at in a few minutes. This is a good insurance policy to make sure you have your Natural Order targets in your library. Other than that, I think most of the time this will probably be in the sideboard. Green Sun Zenith. This is an awesome card. Obviously, you're going to want to play this in a more creature-heavy deck. However, this is going to be good pretty much in any deck you make. The only deck where this is going to be a little slower for you might be the enchantment deck, but it's still going to be fine there. It's going to be great in all the other archetypes. Harmonize. Now, this originally was a plane shifted card from Planar Chaos, which was based on Concentrate from blue, and green in those days didn't get a whole lot of card draw. Today, green gets a little more card draw. It's a little more efficient in that department, but this card, especially in this set, can be very valuable because it does something that you don't see quite as much, at least in this set, that green can do, and that's draw a fair amount of cards. So playing this in any of the archetypes can be very good for you. It's 2 on color, obviously, so if you're going really deep, just be wary of that. However, for the most part, this is going to be awesome in any of the green 2-color archetypes. Heritage Druid. Very good in the elf deck, and it kind of wants to live in that Gullgary Elf deck because it takes 3 elves really to activate the ability. But if you have that, you're able to ramp very nicely into some larger creatures, perhaps, maybe even creatures that aren't elves, but this is going to be a great way to just maybe get some high-end stuff out from your deck. Honden of Life's Web. So if you've been watching the previous videos, you know that there's a Honden in every color. They're in uncommon, and some are better than others. However, in conjunction together, they're all very good. So there is a draft deck out there where you're probably going to try to go deep, go 5 colors, just do 5 color good stuff, pick up all the dual lands and pick up the Hondens, and you may actually have a pretty good deck on your hands. Now, this one on its own is okay. It's maybe my 3rd favorite one or so. It costs 5. It feels a little expensive considering the spirit token doesn't fly. If it flew, it might be a little different story for me, but I'm probably not trying to put one of these in a deck. However, maybe if I have a second Honden, like say I'm in Simic, the blue one is very, very good, or even the Zoo deck, the red one's pretty good too, and I have the ability to maybe play 2 of these, it becomes a lot better at that point. So you might play this occasionally. A lot of times probably won't make your cut unless it's really going to work in conjunction with at least one other Honden. Imperious Perfect. Well, here's the Elf Lord of the set. Now, it's at rare, which is a little awkward. I'd like to see maybe this at uncommon for the Elf archetype, but I don't know, maybe that would have been too good. This is cool because not only does it give all your elves +1/+1 other than itself, but it also allows you to create elves, so it kind of becomes an engine on its own. So even if you're not in the elf deck, this is very playable just because you can actually create more elves. Invigorate. This is a really good combat trick. It's one of those pitch cards. Now, granted, if you're attacking into your opponent, it would say a trample creature or something, it's a little awkward to pitch this because then it's basically just getting a +1/+1 instead of +4/+4. But if you use that ability to save a creature, it can be very, very good for you. Having said that, most of the time you're probably just going to cast this for 3, get the advantage, put it on something that's really beating down. This is going to be great in the Zoo deck, but it can be good in the other archetypes too. Lanowar Elves. This is at common. This is just classic ramp. Any archetype in green is going to be very happy to have this. It's just going to accelerate your game plan. Yes, it will probably shine a little more in the Gullgary Elf deck, right? Because it is an elf, you can get some enhanced value from that. However, this is going to be very good anywhere you choose to play it. Lies Alanah Huntmaster. Now, this is another card that wants to be in the Gullgary Elf deck, but stay open to some of these strategies because, for example, this one's a 3/3 for 4, still a pretty good card, and if you have a few elves in your deck even, you'll get some value out of this. So even if you're just running a few Lanowar Elves for ramp, this could still be a good card in your deck, even if you're not in the Gullgary deck. So don't forget about some of these elves and completely discount them if you're not playing Gullgary, because there are some that are pretty good. Natural Order. So this one is a mythic. Now, this card is a beating if you've ever played this. Amazing cube card. Now, it's not going to show up that often or a lot of the times. The only thing that's a little awkward about this card in the set is the fact that it doesn't have a ton of targets that are really amazing. It has a few, but they're at the mythic and the rare slot. For example, there's a Temur card, Maelstrom Wanderer. That would be a fantastic target, but that's another mythic, so you'd have to kind of bank on getting those 2 mythics. There's a pretty good green rare we're going to look at in just a moment, and there's a few other decent targets for this thing, but it might be awkward because you could open this and really not have a great target. So just assess that. This works really well too with Gaia's Blessing, which we mentioned before, just to make sure that target is in your library before you actually play this card. But if the moon and stars align and you have a good target for this card and even a Gaia's Blessing to back it up, this could be a very powerful play. Nature's Claim. Now, this is a sideboard card. It's there to deal with an artifact or enchantment that's problematic. It gives the controller 4 life, so keep that in mind if you ever need to just gain life. You could also use this on yourself, but what's really appealing about this card is it's an instant and only costs 1. Nimble Mongoose. So this is a threshold creature with Shroud. This is going to be fantastic in that Simic deck. It really wants to mill itself, get cards in the library, and you basically end up with a 3/3 creature that your opponent can't target, but also you can't target. Keep that in mind, for only 1 mana, and that is very efficient. Speaking of efficiency, here's Rancor. This is an incredible enchantment. It has value just simply because if it's going to the graveyard, it ends up back in the owner's hand. So if it gets discarded for some reason, you can get it back. Your creature dies, you get it back. It only costs 1 to play. This is incredible. So this is going to be fantastic in the zoo deck. It's going to really help you continue to beat down. But this is going to be good in any of the decks. This is fine in any archetype where you have creatures and you want to fight with them, which is going to be basically any green deck. Regal Force. So this is a rare, and this is a target potentially for natural order, but it's not a super amazing target for natural order just because you get a 5/5 with no evasion. Where this really is going to shine is a deck where you're trying to go wide. Now it does cost 3 green and 4 colorless, so it's a little bit pricey and very mana intensive in green. So you probably don't want to be playing this if you're going 3, 4, 5 colors most of the time. However, if you're in a deck like the Gullgary Elf deck, which will probably be a fairly wide deck, and you have a lot of ramp, maybe some of those Lanowar Elves. There's also another black elf we looked at the other day that is going to help you ramp. This could be a good card in that deck, so keep an eye out for that opportunity. It could also be playable in some builds of the Simic or Zoo deck, again, if you have some ramp to back it up. Roar of the Worm. This is really going to shine more in the Simic deck because if it does get milled, you have a very economical flashback cost on this. For 4, you get a 6/6 creature. You almost really kind of want to get this in the graveyard. However, again, it's still not bad, especially with some ramp. Even if you don't mill it, you can still cast it. Hopefully, sort of early with maybe a couple Lanowar Elves or something like that, and then cast it again for 4. Tons of value there. And because of that, it also fits into the Zoo deck just fine. Roots. This is kind of a funny card to see just because in the current set we have sleep paralysis, which is basically the same thing in blue, but it can also affect flying creatures. So this comes from the old days where green would have this effect, but of course they were weak against flying. So still a good card though. It's going to help you deal with a big creature on the ground that's going to be a threat for you. Also has bonus value in the Selesnya deck where enchantments matter, and you could get bonuses off just having another enchantment. Seal of Strength. So this is basically kind of the slow version of Giant Growth, but it does have the extra advantage of being an enchantment, and that's going to, again, matter in the Selesnya deck. So even if you're not in that deck, however, this is still a very good card just to help grow one of your creatures, especially a trample creature. This will fit very well in the Gruul Zoo deck as well. Sentinel Spider, also known as Sarah Spider, basically because it's a Sarah Angel, but instead of flying, it has reach. Very powerful card. Again, going to be good in the Zoo deck. We're just trying to beat down any deck that is ramp, though, and can get this out slightly early. This is a very good creature and will fit into a lot of archetypes. It's a common, so you'll see a fair amount of these around. Silvo's Rogue Elemental. Now another good natural order target, but again, more importantly, another 3 green casting cost on this card. Again, if you're in green, as long as you're not trying to go super deep, like 4 or 5 colors, this is going to be a great creature for you. It's going to really shine again in the Zoo deck. It just wants to ramp into big things. That's what that deck's trying to do, so it's kind of tailor-made for that. However, it's still good in any deck where you have a fair amount of ramp. The Simic deck, for example, might be able to get away with this. Even Gullgary could get away with this if you have enough ramp in the deck. Sylvan Library, maybe one of the most popular cards in the set. This is at rare. You're not going to see it all the time, but if you've never played with this card, try it out. It is incredible. It fits into any archetype. Even worth splashing green just to play this card, but basically it's almost like brainstorming every turn, but then you also have the option to pay life and not put the cards back on top of your library. Is probably the simplest way I can explain this card. It's incredible. It just gives you an amazing amount of card selection, lets you just dig deeper into your library, and when the time comes and you can afford to exchange life for an extra card, it can be just a huge swing in the game. So play this card every time you get it if you can. It's just incredible. Sylvan Might. So here's an instant, but it also has flashback, so it's going to work especially well in the Simic deck where it may end up in the graveyard, but you still get value out of it. So having said that, it also gives trample, which is pretty good in the Zoo deck. Keep an eye out for this, especially for those 2 archetypes. Thorin Weld Archer. Now this is an elf, so yes, it wants to be in the Gullgary deck. However, it has reach and death touch. It's a common, only costs 2. It's a 2/1. This is an awesome creature, probably in any deck. Now, another place where this will shine will actually be the Selesnya deck, because that deck's going to run a little bit slower. It's trying to put an engine together with the enchantments, so this is a nice way to slow down the game and let you build that engine. Next we have Timberwatch Elf, and yes, this is another card that's going to excel in the green-black Gullgary deck. This is another one that you have to be pretty all-in on elves for it to really get its value. Werebear, another great card for the Simic deck. You're looking for that value out of Threshold. Well, this is it. You're getting potentially a 4/4 for 2. But on top of that, it also ramps as well. That's pretty amazing. And because of that, it's flexible enough to really go into probably any of the decks. Wirewood Symbiote, decent in the Gullgary Elf deck, might not always make your cut, but it's fine if you want a way to perhaps untap your creatures. This is also a good way to enhance your ramp. It sets you back, unfortunately, by making you return an elf to your hand. However, at the same time, it could untap, say, a Lanowar Elf for a little extra value. Zank Swarm, so this is a good sideboard card against anything that's trying to play any sort of combat tricks on your turn. So this could be things like direct damage in red, it could be another green deck that has a lot of combat tricks, stuff like that. Bring it in those occasions. This is probably a little more here for constructed purposes, but very good in certain situations out of the sideboard. Havermaet Enchantress. Now, obviously, this is the common that wants to be in the Selesnya Enchantress deck, and it's going to be very, very good in that enchantment deck. So get as many of these as you can if you're in that archetype. Go all in on this, because this is where a lot of your value is going to come from at the common level for those enchantments. Now we'll move on to the Selesnya cards. We're going to start with Armadillo Cloak. Now, this is an interesting card. First off, I do want to point this out. It feels like lifelink, but it's not lifelink. Lifelink, when the damage is done, you immediately gain the life. There's no trigger. This is a trigger for the life gain. It's very, very different in certain circumstances. As a matter of fact, one time I was playing Cube on Magic Online, and my opponent had this card, and I believe this game is actually somewhere on the channel, but I attacked in. Opponent had a creature with Armadillo Cloak, blocked with it, thinking that they would stay alive because they would gain the life, made some unprofitable blocks because of that decision, and unfortunately what happened is they took lethal and didn't gain the life because they would have had to wait for the trigger after the attack. So can be awkward. Be careful of that. However, this is still an amazing card. It's going to be fantastic. Obviously, in the Selesnya deck, it's in Selesnya colors. But even if you maybe put this in Simic or Zoo and just splash the white, this could be very good. Glare of Subdual. Another card that is a little weird because it feels like, sure, it wants to be in the enchantment deck. It is an enchantment. However, this card will really shine if you're really going wide. For example, maybe the elf deck splashes some white, or where this could really be good is the Boros deck splashing green, because you have a lot of token strategies in that deck. So yeah, this is interesting. It's fine probably in the enchantment deck just as another enchantment and maybe some extra value towards the end of the game, but I think there's other decks where this will work even better. Sharples Agent, so very happy to see this reprinted. It is a rare, you're not going to see it all the time, but it works very well in the Simic deck. It also works very well in a 3-color build where you may have an opportunity to cascade into other cards, along with like Bloodbraid Elf. So look out for that type of value. If you just happen to open one of these, you might get a little bit of additional cascade value out there. But fantastic card. It's going to work just great in the Simic deck for value. And finally, the last card of the day is Trigon Predator. This is actually a pretty efficient creature, a 2/3 flyer for 3. It's going to work very well in that Simic deck. It's kind of doing what Simic wants to do. It has evasion, which some of the creatures that have Threshold don't have, unfortunately. So this could be good in that deck, but also it's a very fine sideboard card if you're having issues with a problematic artifact or enchantment, good against the Selesnya deck. And even if you're not in Simic colors, you could splash to play this if you needed to deal with that threat. So having said that, those are all the green cards in the set. We're going to be back tomorrow one more time. We're going to look at all of the artifacts and all of the land cards. Until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality videos for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a good day.